everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. I am your host, Ruben Mendive. So I like to start every interview by having my guests introduce themselves. So your name and how you identify for the people at home.
Hey, I'm Kristen Maldonado. I am a film and TV critic, a writer, a social media manager, a producer. I like to think of myself a little bit as a jack of all trades.
So my follow-up is always, where are you from? So like when people ask you that, what's the short version? What's the long version?
Yeah, so I'm from New York. I grew up on Long Island. My grandparents are respectively from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and then they came here. And my parents are from New York. So, I think I'm like a second generation.
Honestly, it depends who you ask. Some people are second, third. Depends on when your grandparents got here. So whatever feels comfortable for you,
So yeah, I'm definitely like a native New Yorker. Have a little bit of that suburbs meets city vibe.
You said you're from Long Island. I don't know anything about that. So like, how would you describe living there? Like, what was your childhood like there?
Oh yeah, I mean Long Island. I guess it depends on the area, but I definitely grew up in a very white neighborhood. And back then, there wasn't a lot of diversity, so I definitely felt like people didn't know what I was, and because it was so long ago, like and people were not really like politically correct, they would just assume anything. Like people would think that I was African American, people would think that I was Native American, people would think I was Indian, people would think I was Muslim or something like that. But I was just Puerto Rican and Dominican. But back then kids didn't know, and they would just say whatever. So it was definitely a very white area, though. I mean, Long Island, it's suburbs, but it's really close to the city, so that's nice. If you want to like take the train an hour, you can kind of have a little bit of that city lifestyle a little bit. But I do feel like most people that are on Long Island kind of just stay there. So like people don't actually go to the city all that much. Or like I work in the city, so then people, like when I go with my friends, they're like, "Are you sure we're going the right way?" I'm like, "Yes, we're going the right way. Like this is the subway we take, it's fine." But, like they don't really go in that often. Even though, there's like so many great things there, like restaurants and Broadway and stuff. There's a lot of beaches. I feel like everyone's like very into like the waterfront and the beaches. But again, it depends also on like the different neighborhoods you're in. There's some neighborhoods that are very diverse, some that are really not. A lot of working class people, I would say.
So I'm always curious about people during their like high school years. So like 14 to 18, I always frame it in these three questions. So who were you? Who were you pretending to be? And how do you think other people saw you?
Well, I was a theater kid. I feel like actually like 14 to 18 was like a very interesting time because I was super shy. I was like really, really shy, especially in school. It was out of school that I did theater in the area. And that's kind of where I like blossomed, I feel. Because, I was so quiet in school, like people didn't really know much about me. I had a very small group of friends, but I loved to sing. And so I just remember like there would be like random occasions, like we would do like a cabaret at school and I would perform and people would be like, that's Kristen. I thought she was so quiet and shy. Oh, like they would like be surprised because I didn't really like talk a lot in school. And I had all of my friends were outside of school and I felt more comfortable that way, like doing theater outside of school. But so I feel like I was shy. I feel like people thought I was shy and quiet. But I think I just wasn't able to like be who I really am, which is not a shy and quiet person. But when you're just like in this bubble of like people know you or make assumptions about you, and that's kind of like where you're stuck. I felt like that's kind of where I was. And so like, my family knew that I was like loud or talked a lot. Like now I'm known for talking too much, but back then definitely was, people would be surprised when I would like break out of my shell, so to speak.
And so like what got you into theater?
Oh, okay. So my mom made me sign up because I would sing in the shower all the time. Like I would just be nonstop, like having like full-on performances in the shower, and they would hear me and be like, "Oh, actually, that's not that bad. That sounds pretty good. Maybe you should sign up for something. Maybe we should sign you up for theater." And she put me in this class, and I made like 2 friends in it. And we like, they were like, "Oh, we're having auditions for this musical. We just need ensemble people. Do you want to try out?" And I was like, "Okay." I swear, the minute I did that, I was still quiet and shy at school, but like I started making all these friends and coming out of my shell, and by like the second show or third show I did there, people were like, oh, haven't you been here forever? I was like, no, this is only like my second show I've ever done. Like, but this is really fun. And, you know, I like performing and making friends and being goofy. So I think that definitely broke me out of my shell. And I'm like glad my mom signed me up for that. Even though originally I was like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. I'm too shy. I can't. But then, like, you know, things change and you find out who you really are.
How would you describe your household? Like, what was it like growing up? What did your parents do for a living?
My dad is like, he works in like banking. And my mom, I feel like when we were growing up, she stayed home and was with us. But now, like, then she went and she works as, she worked at like as a secretary at schools, or now she works as like in like the office of like a guidance counselor's office. Growing up, like, my family is so fun. And we're like really nerdy and we like to dance. And, you know, we'd always play these like 90s, this like, you know, like the 90s, like R&B. My mom loves to dance. She like is like a hustle dancer. And my dad is very goofy and like nerdy. So we grew up collecting comic books and going to Comic-Con and going to Free Comic Book Day. And that was just like a big part of my childhood. I feel like my dad really got me into like pop culture and entertainment because that's all the stuff he's interested in. We're always like, I'll call him and be like, all right, what did you watch today? What am I watching next? What do you watch? You know, like, and we'll just go back and forth. Yeah, my family is like really close. We're very like goofy, silly, love music. My brother's very musical as well. He can play like every instrument. It's like crazy. And so, yeah, so growing up, we were, you know, had a lot of music. Like me and my brother would watch High School Musical and perform for our parents. And like even growing up, like me and my brother and my cousins would do like shows for the holidays. We would like make up our own musical productions. And we have these like certain Spanish songs that like we call the cousin songs that we would like, I'm getting married soon. And the first thing I got from my aunt and my cousins were like, you're going to play the cousin songs, right? And I was like, of course. So like Vaya Mi Gente, like the Just Two Brothers and Proyecto Uno and and stuff like that. That's like we love that. My family loves to party. So.
And so, like, what'd you do after high school? Like, do you have a plan? Did things go according to plan?
You know, I went to college and I was like, okay, I'm going to be a theater major, right? Like, that's what I want to do. I want to do musical theater, so I'll be a theater major. And then I feel like, you know, sometimes when you're in the middle of school, you're like having like a crisis, like, should I be here? What am I doing? Like, maybe I don't want to go to this school. Maybe I need to do something else. And during that time, I was like, maybe I'll change colleges, or maybe I'll join a sorority, or maybe I'll join the radio station. And what I ultimately ended up doing was joining the radio station at my college. And then I was like, oh, this is really fun. You know, there's an opportunity to like combine my love of talking a lot with like performance and like entertainment and talking about movies and TV shows. And once I did that, I switched my major to broadcast journalism. That was like my end of junior year. I was like, oh God, what is going to happen now? I have to stay an extra semester. What are people going to think? But you can't really worry about those things. I think it worked out better. And actually that last semester I ended up getting on the dean's list because I only had like 2 classes and an internship. So I was getting A's. I was like, wow, this is great. Maybe I should have done this the whole time. But then during that time, I was just like trying to do as many internships as possible. The first internship I did was for this place called the Celebrity Cafe, which was writing news articles about entertainment, doing interviews, but it was all virtual. So that was nice that I could like be in the middle of class and be like typing out, like writing articles. And at that same time, I was like on Tumblr trying to write my own entertainment news articles. And I was doing a lot of just like writing and trying to like create something, like get my voice out there, maybe create my own entertainment space. And then from there, I just kept doing more internships. I interned at Marvel, which was really cool because, you know, like I said, I was a big nerd. So I got to help out with their podcast. I interned at News 12 and I got to help with the entertainment news reports. And then my last internship was at Nicktoons Teen Nick, which was amazing because I love Degrassi. So I got to work on like one of the later seasons of Degrassi and it was like awesome, like helping out socially in that way. And then from there, I got my job at MTV doing social. Well, it wasn't actually doing social then. That didn't even really exist yet. It was like we would put the full episodes online. That was what our job was. And we would write I had to do an edit test where I had to write the copy and write captions. And like they, you know, wanted to make sure that we were able to pick the right kind of thumbnail and things like that to really like entice people to check out the episodes and different clips and stuff. So you really had to have like this snappy, quick, fun copy to entice people.
So many like brands and platforms have like their own like personalities on social media. So I am curious of like what that life is like. Like how does that even work? Like how much is like your own like sort of take and how much is like this like editorial thing? So can you sort of talk us about like that, like this like branded like social media account content?
Yeah. So, well, what's interesting is, so like I said, originally our job was to put up the full episodes, but then they were like, oh, you're watching these, you might as well run the social accounts for them too, so that we don't have to have like all these people trying to figure out, you already watched the episode, you know what's happening. So that's kind of how I got into my job. I didn't go to school for social media. I wasn't even like, didn't have a huge social presence at that time. But I was like, this is fun. Like, yeah, sure, I'll do this. And then it turned into a whole team of just running like show social pages. What we would do is kind of think about, and this is what we do now as well, because now I'm on the MTV brand social team, but we think about, who is our audience? Who are we? Who are we trying to speak to? Are we like your best friend? Are we your like older sister? Are we, every voice on social is different. And it kind of feels like acting in a way, actually, which is how I always kind of like went back to it. It's just like, if I'm running the girl code social pages, that's like a comedian. I'm not a comedian, but I need to like find my inner comedian and relatable, girl to write social copy and do these fun things that like will connect with people. But then, Wild and Out, that's like a completely different show. That's like very like male centric. And, also comedy, but a different type of comedy. So like, how do I tap into that voice? I feel, to me, MTV brand is like the most me type of voice. So like that one is a little bit easier to get into because it's just like being a big fan and community. But we definitely like will break down like, who is this? Who are we talking to? What do we like as this brand account? And things like that to really craft the voice. Sometimes we'll even name the person that we create. But I think it's really helpful because like, it just makes you kind of get into a different mindset of like, who is this? I think another thing that we really focus on is community. That's a huge thing for us, which is just like, responding to people. And the thing is like everybody that works where I work, we all are fans of pop culture and entertainment. So a lot of the times this is really like how we feel, like we're just kind of like being ourselves. But then, maybe you tweak the voice a little bit to what makes the most sense on different platforms, because, maybe on Facebook, people are a little bit more old school. So they're looking for more of like a, J-Lo or Mariah, whereas maybe on TikTok, people want to see more like the more up and coming stars, and just kind of like tweaking things in that way. But yeah, it's really interesting to just like kind of be an actor and do different voices and like figure out what is this brand's sound, like who are we kind of thing.
There are people who are trying to actively have engagement on social media. Like Dionne Warwick all of a sudden came out of nowhere. And it's like, is this her? Who knows? And like sometimes like the randomest accounts like KFC will like clap back at like something. You're like, oh, okay. So what do you feel like works really well on certain platforms? And what do you see that people are doing that isn't like really like the way to go about it?
Well, I think it depends on every type of, the type of brand you are, because there's some places that maybe, well, I think like in a place like, like Wendy's or KFC, where like sometimes they're like really sassy and clap back. A lot of times those are people working at agencies that they really have to actually get like permission ahead of time to like post certain things. Or sometimes maybe their companies are more flexible and they're able to just kind of like post things because they trust what they're doing. But like a lot of times I feel like in the agency setting, they have like copy written out like months in advance and they have to get everything approved. Whereas like for, like the accounts that I work on, I'm just, it's like me doing it. And I choose what I want to do and I choose, how I want to speak. Like there's not someone else that's like, oh no, you can't do, I mean, I'm sure if someone was like, you really can't do this, they would like let you know. But like it's really like, I own this property kind of thing. And I'm the one choosing what goes up when. Like there's not someone that needs to like see every single thing that I do before I do it and make sure that it's good. In terms of like what works and what doesn't work, I think really it's just like being really authentic to the brand, so if it makes sense and you guys want to have fun on the social platforms, then like go for it. I think one place that I do see a lot of just like maybe I don't want to say mistakes, but like things that maybe like could be done better is when it comes to like social issues. I think that there are a lot of times where brands either don't step in when they should, or they step in, but in a way that feels really fake. And I think really it comes down to like that authenticity. Like I know when we step in on something, the person who's actually running that account oftentimes like writes it from their personal perspective. They'll say like, as a social media manager, even I need to step, like they've literally written things like that and made it more personal because they really do feel that way, but also they want it to like come across as like the person who's running this account feels this way. It's not just like as a brand, we have to do this thing. Whereas like I think for some places, it just feels like, oh, we need to step in and say something, right? Like we have to, or people will come in and do it too late. And it's like, well, it feels like you're just like, you missed the boat now. That to me is maybe a place where I think, people can think a little bit more about it, because, and, I think also a lot of times with like these types of posts, people will rag on the social media managers and be like, oh, that was an intern that messed that up. And it's like, no, that's maybe someone higher up that didn't listen to what everyone else said and then just kind of like, had certain people post things because they thought that's what they needed to do, which I feel like you sometimes see that on like other platforms where you're just like, oh, what was this brand that literally has nothing to do with this thinking? And I think a place where you can really like shine and do a lot of interesting things is like TikTok has been a really interesting place lately, and a place where people can grow very quickly.
You sort of mentioned that you were always like into pop culture, and then in college you got into like broadcasting and journalism. So I am curious of like your coming into TV and film criticism. Like, can you sort of take us through that journey of like how you got started and sort of what you've been able to build from it?
I mean, basically, when I graduated college, I had heard from other journalists at panels that if you want to make it, and you want to be like on camera, you need to kind of record yourself doing things, because no one's going to just like let you go up and be on camera. So they were like, you could do stand-ups, or you can film yourself, asking people questions when they're coming out of the movie theater, and then post it and, make a reel out of that. And I was like, okay, well, if I could do that, but like, what if I just like went online and talked about movies and TV and celebrity culture and things like that? What if I just like put myself out there and tried it? And I think like a lot of times people will say that like they went into the space because they were inspired by like someone else that was on YouTube. But honestly, I wasn't really on the YouTube platform like that. So I was just kind of going into it as like, oh, well, people in the journalism space said, make a reel. So I'm going to try to make something more than that, I guess. I'm going to put something else out there that maybe I can continue putting out there, and maybe it will grow into something, or maybe I'll learn something. When I started out on YouTube, I was just trying to do kind of anything. So I started out doing this video where I sat in my kitchen and I talked about a couple of new things that came out in entertainment. I think it was like JoJo had just gotten out of her horrible contract. Justin Bieber was doing something, and I think maybe like Frozen was doing something, if I remember correctly. It was like maybe 7 or 8 years ago now that I started there. And so originally I just started out talking about like entertainment as a whole. Like slowly I started doing like, I think my first one was maybe like a Divergent review where I was talking about all the connections between the movie and the movie and the book. I didn't really know what I was doing. I remember there's like one really terrible video I did talking about one of the first, I think it was like Amazing Spider-Man 2. And it was like me talking for like 25 minutes, just basically summarizing the entire movie. And I was like, what is this video? That was horrible when I look back now. But I think, you kind of got to go through those steps to figure out like what you're doing. And so slowly I started doing just more TV and movie reviews and things in that space. In the very beginning, because I didn't really know what I was doing, I would do like unboxings. I would do makeup stuff. I'm like, that's not really my thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to figure it out. And then I slowly was just like, okay, movie and TV reviews, let's just focus on that, and that will be my niche, and we will see what happens. And I definitely think that it's grown a lot. I personally think it's a lot better than when I first started. I think my personality is still the same, because even going into it at the very beginning when I didn't know like what I was doing, I was like, I want everyone to see like who I am. So I just hope that, my hair and makeup maybe got a little bit better, my lighting got a little bit better, and I figured out how to like form my opinions in a more succinct way. And then, just working at MTV and learning about the digital video there, I think has really helped me with my digital video, and vice versa. The things that I'm creating, I think have helped me in creating certain things at my job as well.
how did like you get to the point where you're like interviewing people and like getting into like that press junket, like PR? Like how does that come about?
That was hard. I will say that was hard. When I was like still around college age, or maybe had just graduated, there was this really cool program that journalists were offering to have you help write, and then they would give you like opportunities to go to like different events. It was called Manhattan. So I met some really cool journalists that way, and I was just like, they would send me to like a screening, or one of the things that they had sent me to that I was able to keep up with was Tribeca Film Festival. So I went that one time, and then every year after that, even though their site kind of ended, I kept going. And so that was my one interview thing that I did every year, but I didn't have any other opportunities. That was like kind of it. And I was kind of like, how do I branch out to do more? I get into this one festival. I don't know what else. I don't know how to like break into that. But I got to tell you, during the pandemic really is where I feel like, especially PR has been like, oh, maybe people that make reviews on YouTube are a little bit more serious than we thought. I started getting screeners during the pandemic. Typically, I would just, have to wake up really early and try to watch a show or movie before work, and then film then, and then edit on the train. And then, now I've been getting screeners ahead of time. And then once I started getting that, every time I would get a screener, I would say, I'm also interested in doing an interview. And a lot of times they would say, oh, sorry, we don't have the space. Oh, sorry. And then the more I kept asking, and then the more that I kept working with like the same types of people over and over again, they were kind of like, oh yeah, here you go. Yeah, sure. We'll check if I don't always get in, but sometimes they're like, oh yeah, here you go. Or the first junket I ever did was just last year, doing Utopia on Amazon Prime. And that was really cool. And then the second junket I ever did was Bridgerton, which I was like freaking out because, I guess no one really knew at that time that it was going to be like the hit it is. But then like after the fact, it was like, wow, that was pretty awesome. I got to do that junket. But it definitely took time. And, there's still things that I want to like try to get into that like don't always work, or things that I want to do that, doesn't always happen. But I think really it's just like the persistence of like, you just keep asking and hope that things will work out.
When you do have these interviews with like actors or people who like worked on a film or TV show, like what is your interview approach? Like how do you go into it? Like, do you have tips and tricks? Like, what is your like style?
Whenever I'm watching anything, I'm writing like little notes down on my phone so I can like prepare myself if there's like something that I'm like, because then I'll forget. Honestly, I'll forget by the end, like, oh shoot, that was something I really was interested in. Let me like write that down. So I'll write down little notes, and sometimes those notes end up turning into like inspirations for questions or for like directions of things. And then when I go into it, there are, like the typical questions like what drew you to this, or like what inspired you to create this. But I always try, if I can, to think of something a little bit outside the box, just because sometimes I think that can, bring in maybe more of their personality and more their own personal experience to something. So one that I was really proud of was that Bridgerton one where, we talked about what it was like for them working together. But then, a big part of the story is the societal pressures that they have, for Phoebe's character, Daphne, to be, the first person to go through like this debutante type of thing, and like basically bring this like high society background to her family. Like if she gets a good match, that can help everyone else. And for Simon being like, this pressure of like, he wants to like have a family and do these things, but also he wants like this revenge. So he can't really, it's like battling yourself sort of thing, and sort of these pressures. And so I asked them about that, and they were able to talk about their own personal struggles with dealing with pressure, whether that be, being in the spotlight, or, being on the internet, or being a woman in the industry, and then kind of tie it back to what they were thinking about with their roles and how they like kind of tapped into that. And it was really cool to just like hear them, being able to share their own personal experience. I think another thing that I try to think about is I want to have a conversation, and I want to like go into it being like, what do I want to know? So like I had this really fun interview with Robert Rodriguez, who's like such an icon. And to me, one of the things that I thought was so amazing is just that like he's written and directed all of these stories about these young Latinos, and in these amazing spaces, like being spies or being superheroes. And we never get to see that. And to hear him say like, that's actually what I built my entire career on, was bringing that representation out. Because I've seen so many people connect to that and be so excited to finally see us in these positive lights and not just seen as like these stereotypical characters. And that's why he decided, like from the very beginning, you know, over his entire career, that he wants that to be like a big spotlight, is featuring these Latinos in these just different positions that we don't always get to see ourselves in, like being superheroes. And so that's something that to me was just like a personal thing that I always connected with. And then I got to actually talk to him about it. And, you know, and he was saying like that just makes me feel like really great that, like, you know, all these people connect to that, because that's my background and I'm telling an authentic story based off of my experience. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I love it.
So, you know, there's a lot of content out there. I think like representation and like is really an important conversation. But, you know, as someone who like reviews TV and films that maybe like representation wise are very like precious and important, what's it like to then have to be like, okay, what is my honest opinion of this? Like, I'm just curious of like what goes through your mind. Like, do you feel like there's a pressure? Like, how do you approach that?
I think there can be a feeling of pressure a little bit, just because obviously, you know, I feel like especially as Latinos, like I just feel like we're definitely like the least underrepresented group, in my opinion, out of everyone. Like I feel like people are having their moments, but we still haven't had our moment yet. But maybe it's this year. You know, there's a lot of really good Latino-led projects coming out this year. But I feel like, you know, sometimes there's that pressure of like, well, wow, this is a really great Latino-led project. Do I have to say it's amazing because I want to see more? I always want to give my honest opinion, no matter what. So, you know, sometimes I'll sit there and think like, okay, what did I really, really think about this? Yes, it's amazing we're getting this story, but was it actually good? And I think a great example of that is my Selena review, because, you know, Selena is such an icon. And leading up to the show coming out on Netflix, I was so excited. I could not wait. And then we were watching it and I was like, I don't know if this is, I don't think this is very good. And it like hurt me a little bit, but I don't want to like steer anyone in the wrong direction if that's how I feel. And I felt I didn't like it. And I felt like Selena deserved better, which is what I titled my video. And, you know, I never want to be like clickbaity or like lie about anything to trick people to watch. So when I said Selena deserved better, that's what my video is about. And there were some people that agreed with me. There were some people that were like, well, we never get Latino representation. Like you should have been like positive about this because we never get this. And it's like, I can understand that like we don't get this kind of Latino representation and that we want more of it, but also I want good representation. And I didn't think that this was a great story. I mean, Selena's story in general is great, but the wigs were kind of atrocious. And, you know, I didn't think that they really captured her essence. And the thing is, I'm never going to be mean about it. I'm not going to go into my video and be like, this was garbage, trash, fire, blah, blah, you know, because that's not my personality. That might be someone else's personality, and that's great. I'm always going to say the truth. So I do think that Selena deserved better, but I'm going to say it in a nice way. I'm going to tell you what I didn't like. I'm going to tell you what I did like. And then by the end, I'll tell you my overall thoughts. And I feel like that's like a good way to just like be able to give you a little bit of everything, you know, because there were some things maybe that I enjoyed, but overall I didn't like it. So I'm going to tell you kind of a little bit of everything. But you know what? Second one's coming out. I'm going to watch it too. You know, I'm not like, you know, just because I didn't like something doesn't mean I might not like the next part of it, or that I hate it. And, you know, I would be happy to do interviews about it. I would be, you know, be happy to cover the second season. Just because I didn't like the first season, like that doesn't really mean anything to me. To me, you know, I'm still going to be open to seeing what else they're going to do. And if it's not as, you know, if it's still not good, then that's just my opinion. But I'm not going to like, I guess, judge something and be like, write something off completely.
Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of like, you know, it's interesting because there is like this point of like fan expectations and like, and just the general public of like anticipation for stuff. And then it's that thing of also like, well, there are people who are getting screeners, there are people who are watching it, there are people whose job it is to like review and tell us what they thought about it. And I think especially with Selena, that was such an interesting time of seeing like everyone's really excited about it. And then some reviews weren't great. And then sort of the narrative turned very quickly. And sometimes it was even before people had even had the chance to watch. So I was just curious of like what it's like to like, did you have any pushback that people were like, just from like the general like Twitter sphere or like online sphere, that it was like, oh no, you don't know, or like you haven't given it a chance, or like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or like, you know, if you're a fan of Selena, like, or you're not a real fan of Selena because you didn't like it, kind of thing. And it's like, well, I have to always be honest about what I think. But the thing is that reviews are opinions, and everybody thinks differently. So there might have been other people that loved it. There might have been other people that hated it even more than me. There might be people that, were kind of mixed about it. And I think that's like a big discussion also in like the film TV space, is just like, we don't have to like the same things, and that's okay. Everyone has different opinions. That's why like someone might like mushrooms and someone might not, because like we're not all the same. Otherwise we'd be robots. My whole thing is just like being nice about it. Like I'm not going to go in and be like, this was garbage trash fire, but I'm going to tell you why I didn't like it. If you don't agree, then I want to hear your opinion, and let's like talk about it. And maybe I'll be like, oh yeah, that was actually a good point. Or maybe you'll be like, oh yeah, that was a good point about what I said. I'm very like open to hearing different opinions, because I'm not like, oh, this is my way or the highway. And there's times when maybe someone has opened my eyes to something that I didn't think of, because, especially when you're watching something early, or if you just haven't talked to anyone else about it yet, maybe you didn't think of something and you're like, oh, that's a great point. There was like this episode of Charmed that I did not like, but that someone came in and was like, actually, I think this was like a whole metaphor about COVID. And I was like, oh, well, I missed that, but I mean, I still didn't like it, but that makes a lot more sense now. So, okay, that, maybe there's something that I happen to not catch. I mean, I'm not perfect, so maybe there's something I missed. I'm just going off my initial thoughts and reaction. So I'm very open to, hearing other people's thoughts, and maybe I'll change my mind, maybe I won't, but I like to hear other opinions.
So I'm like, what are the shows and like the content that like you feel like, oh, I want to do like a deeper dive on this. Like I want to continue, I want to follow this along. So like, how do you make that choice? Like what is it that like motivates you or appeals to you about certain things?
Things that maybe already performed well for me, that maybe I already enjoyed, and I see, oh, people liked that. Now let me do something even more. So like, I think you and On My Block are good examples of that, of like, I put out maybe one review and it did really good. And I'm like, well, I liked this show already and people liked this, so let me do something else. So like for you, season 2, I did a review. I did a like a breakdown of the ending and like the Easter eggs that maybe could lead to what is going to happen in the next season. And then I did like theories. And so that was like 3 different videos that all actually performed like pretty well. And I'm like, okay, well, if you like that, then I know next time when there's another season, I can do more things like that. And I already am having fun dissecting these things on my own, and the fact that other people want to see them now, I can like maybe actually make a video on it. Or like On My Block, the same thing. Like I did a review of the first season and it did really well. I was like, okay, so let me do the second season. Oh, okay, people actually like this, and I like this show too. So what can I do to dive a little bit deeper? Oh, okay, the end was really crazy at for this last season. Let me do a whole video just dissecting that. Or like, let me do a whole video doing theories, or maybe there's just shows that I enjoy, like High School Musical, the series. I just am a fan. So I was like, let me just do weekly videos. Sometimes it depends on what it is, because the bandwidth can be difficult. I already have a full-time job to do, such deep dive videos. So sometimes it depends, or, maybe something's just interesting, like The Haunting of Hill House and like The Haunting of Bly Manor. I was like, oh, those are interesting. There's so many Easter eggs and connections in there. Let me do a video just on that. I think that's interesting. I'm already writing things down as I'm like reviewing it. So maybe I can do a whole video on it and, show maybe the connections between both seasons, or with Charmed, there was, for the very first season, I did like here's all the connections or references to the original series in this first season, and things like that. I think people enjoy because, it's kind of like an Easter egg hunt, and you're already kind of looking for those things and hoping to find them. And so sometimes I think those perform even better than reviews, honestly, because, people want to know, oh, what was that connection between, the original High School Musical in this series? Are there, did they bring this in? Did they bring that in? And it's really fun to like explore that. So usually it's if a show I already know is performing well, or if I just think it's really interesting, maybe I'll just try to do it anyway and see if maybe people will like it. Or if there's like mysteries where you can really like dive into them, because I like connecting all the pieces. I feel like that's really fun. I want to be like a little detective.
So I've noticed that like representation is something that's like really important to you. And then I saw that you have like Pop Culture Planet, this video podcast that's like tailored to that. So like sort of what was the motivation behind this new like direction and sort of like widening this platform for yourself?
Representation and inclusion is just something that has always been important to me. But I think as I continue to grow online, I can focus on that more, or like, and I think I do definitely try to discuss that in my movie reviews and TV show reviews, but I was trying to think of a way that I could like bring other people onto my channel and collaborate more, because I do feel like with my reviews and things like that, it's hard for me to bring someone else in to do a review with me. I just find that like difficult to like logistically figure out, you know, like maybe we both need to see something ahead of time and, you know, plan that timing to like get together. And I just find that can be kind of hard, especially when things are like, you know, so quick. So I was like, how can I bring other people into my channel, but also talk about things that like mean something to me outside of just a regular review? Like maybe there's a way that we can like dive into like other topics in the entertainment space. I decided to form Pop Culture Planet. I never thought that I would do a podcast, but you know, my boyfriend was, fiance now, was talking to me about it because he listens to a lot of podcasts, and he just like really inspired me to be like, okay, maybe this could be a really cool way to bring other people onto my channel. So I launched it in August. Started out originally like bringing a couple of people on, and we would talk about a topic and maybe talk about some news. And I just felt like the episodes were getting really long, and, you know, everyone talks about news. And I was like, I really want to talk about these specific topics in entertainment. So I got rid of the news portion and just continued to invite people on. It can be other creators. It can be journalists. It could be, you know, maybe directors and writers and actors that I'm a big fan of, or that I want to just know a little bit more. And so I started having all these different people come on. So I feel like I kind of do like two different versions, a little bit of Pop Culture Planet. One, which is like this live stream where we go live on Thursdays panel where, you know, one or two people will join me and we'll talk about a topic. And so we've talked about everything from like the model minority to the superhero space. You know, maybe if I have like, you know, a director or an actor come in, we can actually do like a deep dive of like their career and their experience in entertainment. But I really wanted to also focus on bringing in people that are not always necessarily highlighted. So more people of color, people of different backgrounds, different gender expressions, and different sexuality, because I feel like a lot of times in the entertainment space, we always see the same white guys together. And it can get kind of like frustrating to see that, because it'll be like, oh, we're doing a whole panel. Here's like 5 people, and every single one is like a white guy from the Midwest, which all those guys are really nice. But, you know, sometimes you want to see other people. And so I'm really, really focused on trying to bring other people into the space. I had a really awesome conversation talking about superhero culture. And I feel like typically in that space, you would just see, it would be like, you know, 2 white guys or 3 white guys talking about it. But it was 4 people of color, women and men. And it was just like one of the best conversations I feel like I've had, because we get to hear other people's perspectives and what it's like coming into this space as, you know, maybe a Latino or an African-American person that loves superheroes. That's something also that not a lot of people know about me, is that I'm, you know, a nerd and collect comics and stuff. And so that also allowed me to show a little bit more of myself. People were like, oh, I didn't even know you like that, Kristen. I'm like, oh yeah, I've only collected comics my entire life. But people don't necessarily know all that about me, because I do a lot of like teen stuff, or a lot of like, you know, mysteries and things. So I think it allows that as well. And, you know, but then I've gotten a chance to have like one of my more recent interview versions was with Dante Basco, who was Rufio in Hook and from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And he just had such amazing things to say about how he kind of grew up in the industry and really was inspired by other actors to focus on the Asian American experience and want to uplift those other creatives in that space. And I felt like I was having a masterclass, just like sitting there listening to him talk about, you know, why this is so important to him and why he wants to like highlight other Asian Americans, especially in the current times we're in, but just like in general. And so I just find these conversations so interesting, because sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, oh, is like, how much can you really say about representation and inclusion? Like, have we said everything already? And then I have these conversations and I'm like, oh no, wow, like this guy said something I've never even thought of before. Like, what is representation anyway? What is inclusion? And he was talking about how over the last 100 years, pretty much every story we've seen has been from the lens of a white man. And so, yeah, maybe we've seen certain stories, but you haven't seen them from this person's perspective. And like, it just like, I don't know, I just find the conversation so eye-opening, to be able to just talk to these different people and hear about what they've gone through and what they kind of take away from the experience of being in the entertainment space, and, you know, what they're trying to build. And so that's really where, you know, Pop Culture Planet kind of came out of. It's just like wanting to talk with more people, wanting to get other voices out there and not just hear from the same types of people over and over again. It's been really fun. I feel like I've learned so much and just had like these great conversations with people that maybe I'd never even known before, you know? And then we become friends and I'm like, oh, cool. Now I've made a friend too.
As someone who like talks about reviews, has an eye on this like media sphere, what are some of the conversations you feel are being slept on, and what do you feel are some of like films and TV shows that you feel like are completely running under the radar and we should all be like paying closer attention to?
I just think something that like maybe we don't necessarily realize that I've kind of learned from doing this podcast is just that like, you know, like I said, I grew up in a very white neighborhood and I don't speak Spanish, and there are times where I don't feel Latino enough or that I haven't felt Latino enough. And this is a way for me to kind of feel like that, you know, like feel like I'm contributing. And every person that I've talked to, whether they are Latino and didn't grow up in a white neighborhood, or if they're African American, or if they're half Asian and half white, or if they're full Asian, or if, you know, whatever, everyone has said the same thing. And I'm like, why are we not talking about the fact that we all feel like we're not enough, you know? And it's so interesting because I think so many people, you know, are dealing with that and just not realizing that like we all feel this way, whatever background you are. And maybe there's something else going on there that we can, I don't know, dive into or tap into to realize that like, you know, we're all from these different backgrounds and we're all feeling the same way, and that's okay. So I just thought that was so fascinating. You know, all these people that I would think wouldn't feel that way were feeling the same way as me. One TV show that I think people are sleeping on is On My Block. I feel like it does so well. Maybe doesn't get as much hype as it should. Another one is Julie and the Phantoms, which I love Julie and the Phantoms so much. And like, someone renew this. What is taking so long? I'm afraid it's not going to get renewed, which doesn't make sense to me because everyone I know loves it so much. You know, we get to see a Latina leading a rock band and just, you know, see just like this hopeful, beautiful story, you know, have really fun music. It has like those High School Musical vibes and like Descendants vibes. Why are people sleeping on this? Like, renew it already. Everyone I know loves it so much. And again, those are both like Latino-led shows, which I feel like that is like a space that we're kind of like missing out on, is that like there'll be these like shows led by Latinos for like a season and then they get canceled, and it's like just not maybe what people want to see, or maybe just isn't resonating, or maybe there's not enough promotion. I'm still not sure what is missing in that like disconnect of like why it's so hard for us to have these like Latino-led projects like succeed. I don't really know. Do you have any thoughts on why that is?
I think we put too much pressure on ourselves. I think we're very like passionate about Latinx shows and like having them on, having them stay on, and then feel like we've been let down when they get canceled or are off the air. But I think we have to remember like the number is so small that it's like most shows do fail. Like if you're going to call it a Latinx show, then try to think of other shows like, okay, are the other shows all white shows and how many fail? Probably half, at least half. So I think we just have to
have more numbers.
Yeah, they just have more numbers. So it's all of them could like CBS, NBC, ABC will cancel half their shows half the time. Mm-hmm. And no one says like this was a failure of the white culture. This was a failure. White audiences did not tune into this on CBS. Like, no, so I think we definitely like internalize a lot of that stuff.
That's a great point.
And then I saw someone comment like, oh yeah, like Latinx shows are really corny. Why are they also corny? And I'm like, everything on CBS is really corny.
All the sitcoms.
Like, all the sitcoms are corny. Tyler Perry is corny. Ryan Murphy, although his shows are pretty corny, like Chuck Lorre, very corny shows. Like, and I think we also have to remember that it's like, yeah, sometimes shows are just like you can't invest everything you have into them. And I know we want more, but I think we have to. I don't know. I think we're taking it a lot of it too personally, and it's so much of it is way beyond our control. Even the people who are making these shows, it's beyond their control. And if you have a problem with the wigs, it's like, well, how much money did the network put into the wig budget? You know, it's like, and I think that's the conversations we should be having. It's like, oh, they made the show for pretty cheap, like, or they really rushed it, or like. So I think that's another aspect that we're not. I think we're very good at like punching across and punching down, but no one's like being like, okay, like who's actually making big decisions and who's actually just trying to like work with what they have.
Yeah, that reminds me of this conversation I had with Christian Mercado Figueroa, who just had his short film at South by Southwest, and he was saying, you know, it's like we are fighting over the crumbs. there's like a whole bread up on the table, and then there's like 3 crumbs on the ground, and it's like all of us are fighting over these crumbs, when like there's this whole other piece that, like, you know, maybe if we were able to get access to, you know, better production quality and all these things, like that would, yeah, like you said, we're like punching down on these things that, like, it's really like there's this higher up place that we need to go to, and hopefully we could get the representation there. We should be taking it from the big piece of bread, not our little tiny crumbs.
Yeah, it's show business, you know. These are a lot of these are business decisions being made. And I think we want it to be art, even as writers, we want it to be art, and directors and actors. But, you know, it's very hard to make a very good show, you know.
That did remind me of another good show, though, Kim's Convenience, that unfortunately is going to only have one more season, I think.
Yeah, so I am curious about like the things that are attractive to you in your writing. Like, what do you feel like is something that always catches your eye, or you feel like you really want to speak passionately about?
I think something that I always think about in my writing is, I think 2 things: the analytical kind of side of things. You know, like I mentioned, I like to, you know, deep dive into like connecting little things and finding like these little references. That's something I like to think about a lot. I like to think about the inclusion and representation, and how do I feel about that in the project, and also just like doing research. You know, like I feel like that's something that's really important to me, is looking at, I'll do this even when I'm, you know, watching something. I'll just go on IMDb and start looking up like fun facts about it, and like who's in this and what else have they been in, and oh, these people were in this together. And that's something that I feel like I really bring to my writing, is just like finding, you know, just like really deep diving into what this project is, who was involved, what else have they done, even just as background for me, even if it doesn't necessarily make it into the project or even make it into my review, just because I feel like I always want to know what I'm talking about to the fullest extent. You know, like I've seen reviews where they were talking about this actress who was like a really famous Broadway actress, and they were like, oh, I've never heard of her. This must be like one of her first projects. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is like an icon, you know? And so just like things like that, where I like to like make sure that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm looking up who everyone is, what have they done before, and things like that, if that makes sense.
So I am curious of like, who are the writers that you admire? So who are the people out in the sphere that you're like, these could be friends, peers, heroes, people you creep on Instagram who you're just like loving the work they're doing?
I mean, one of my favorites is my friend Steffi. She has a podcast called Diva Dailies, and she also has a YouTube channel called In My Humble Opinion. And she's so analytical, which I love so much. And on her podcast, she dives into like divas of TV and film, or sometimes divas of music in TV and film. So like, you know, maybe Mariah Carey's Glitter, you know, and she like has all these notes where she'll like dive into like all these things that I think maybe people don't even necessarily think about when they think about certain movies. You know, like I joined her for like this whole back to school session that she was doing of like all these like high school movies. And we got so analytical that I didn't even realize what Bring It On was about until I watched it with her and we talked about it. And I was like, when I grew up, I had no idea this was about cultural appropriation, you know, and it just like really like blew my mind. And so she's definitely someone that like I'm very inspired by when it comes to just like really diving deep into projects and like thinking outside the box. And I'm like I literally like this year had like a whole brain epiphany, like my brain exploded just finding out that that's really what Bring It On was about. So she's someone that I really look up to. KB, she's a journalist that writes for a lot of different publications. She's someone that I really look up to. She's also very focused on representation and inclusion. So she hosts a podcast called the Color Grade Podcast, where they give like a grade of like, was this kind of like, would you recommend this? Like, do you feel like it gave good representation, or is it like it didn't really, or is it like it was still fun, but like it didn't really give us the representation we needed, but you know, and things like that. And she, you know, has just written for so many places, and she's definitely someone that when I read her work, I just feel really inspired by her stuff, as well as Sharonda Williams of Pair Weight. She's someone that also, just in general, is so helpful in the entertainment space of like helping you figure things out. Like, how do I get screeners? How do I do these interviews? How do I think outside the box with these questions? How do I apply to like a critics association? She was like so helpful and instrumental to me in like, I feel like growing my career this year alone, just in terms of her being so supportive of like, if you need help, just ask me and I'll, you know, just try again. I'm like, oh wow, that worked. Just trying again. It worked, you know. And so those are a couple of women in the space that I think are just like amazing writers and amazing at analyzing and being their most authentic selves when they're kind of talking about the projects that, you know, are reviewing or doing interviews around.
So where can people follow you on social media?
You can find me at kmaldo on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. If you had a 1 at the end, you can find me on Instagram. You can find my YouTube channel and all my reviews at youtube.com/kmaldo. And you can also check out my podcast, Pop Culture Planet, on pretty much everywhere that podcasts are available. I also have some accounts at Pop Cult Planet on Twitter and Instagram if you want to, you know, see who's going to be a guest and see extra fun clips and things.
And so I like to ask my guests to help me title the episode. The prompt is a blank Latinx writer. Add as many words as you want, mix them all around, change some of the words, just whatever feels true to you, this conversation, the writing you do. I also use it as a community building tool. So someone will see the title and be like, oh, that's like me, or that's something I want to do. Like, let me check this out.
Analytical, enthusiastic, maybe something in those.
That's fine. This is the hardest question. So
yeah, I'm stumped.
With that, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast.
This
was such a fun conversation. You know, I really admire the work you do. And
thank you.
And yeah, I love watching your videos. I don't even watch the Charm Show, but I'm still watching the recast.
Thank you. I mean, we'll see how far I get. I might